I wired $2,800 to my family in just 14 minutes after Dad called about an urgent medical bill. No hesitation, no questions asked, because I thought that's what a good daughter does. A week later, I found Caribbean cruise tickets hidden in Mom's drawer, 5 tickets, for the entire family, except me. At the same time, they were planning their dream vacation with the exact money I'd just sent them. Did they think I'd just accept it and stay home like some loyal dog waiting for them to return? They were dead wrong. Sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is to simply disappear from their lives. And that's exactly what I did. Comment below if you're watching from your phone or computer. I'm curious to know where you're tuning in from. My name is Emma Martinez, 28 years old, and I'm a software engineer working in Silicon Valley. Throughout my entire life, I've been the good daughter, the one who's always there when family needs help, the one who never says no, the one willing to sacrifice everything for the people I love. Maybe that was the problem all along. My family consists of Dad, Robert, 55 years old, who works in insurance but has a habit of spending beyond his means. Mom, Patricia, 52, a retired nurse who decided to enjoy life early. My older brother Michael, 32, who's married with kids and has always treated asking his little sister for money like it's some kind of natural right. My sister Sarah, 30, recently divorced and living back home with Mom and Dad, along with her 2 young children. Our family home in Fremont used to be the place where I felt safest in the world. Now, every time I visit, I can feel the evaluating looks, the comments about how I'm still single, still haven't settled down like my siblings. But here's the ironic part. In their eyes, I'm the walking ATM, the only one with stable income and no family burdens of my own. The life-changing phone call came on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my cozy studio apartment in Palo Alto, enjoying a glass of wine after a long work day, when my phone started ringing frantically. Dad's voice sounded absolutely panicked. "Emma, sweetheart, I need your help urgently. I just got a bill from the hospital for my recent checkup, $2,800, and they're demanding payment within 36 hours, or they'll send it to collections." My heart practically stopped beating. "Is everything okay with you, Dad?" "Why is the amount so high?" "Nothing serious, honey. Just some tests and x-rays. But insurance didn't cover everything. You know I hate having to ask you for help, but right now..." I cut him off immediately. "Dad, don't ever hesitate to ask me for help. We're family. I'll transfer the money right now." 14 minutes later, I had transferred $2,800 from my savings account. Money I'd been saving for my upcoming Lake Tahoe trip with my college friends. It was a plan I'd been looking forward to all year, my only chance to relax after months of stressful work. When I hung up the phone, I felt this strange sadness washing over me, not because of the money, I could earn it back, but because of that familiar feeling of always having to sacrifice, always having to put other people's needs before my own. But I pushed that feeling down deep, like I'd done hundreds of times before. A week later, life seemed to return to normal. Dad called to thank me, saying everything had been resolved. I canceled my Lake Tahoe trip and told my friends I had a sudden family emergency. They understood, like they always do. I spent the weekend in my apartment, watching Netflix and trying not to think about all the Lake Tahoe photos flooding my friends' Instagram feeds. But fate has its own way of revealing the truth, and the truth was about to shatter the world I thought I understood. That Saturday, I went to Mom and Dad's house for our weekly family lunch, a tradition I'd never missed, no matter how busy I was. The atmosphere in the house felt different somehow. Everyone seemed excited about something, with little laughs and secret glances being exchanged between family members. "Why is everyone so happy today?" I asked while helping Mom set the table. Mom looked momentarily flustered. "Oh, nothing special, honey. It's just everyone's had a good week at work, that's all." But I noticed something was off. Sarah kept texting and giggling at her phone. Michael was having hushed phone conversations with his wife about scheduling arrangements, and Dad sat unusually quiet, occasionally glancing at me with what looked like guilt. After lunch, when I went upstairs to get a jacket I'd left from my last visit, I accidentally overheard a conversation from the living room. "Are you sure Emma won't find out?" That was Sarah's voice. "Don't worry. She's too trusting to suspect anything. And besides, she never goes into our room anyway." That was Mom's voice. "What if she asks why she wasn't invited?" Michael chimed in. "Then we'll say this trip is for people who've settled down." Emma's still not stable enough. Bringing her along would be inappropriate. Dad's voice was dry and matter-of-fact. My heart stopped beating. What trip were they talking about? And why wasn't I supposed to know about it? I quietly went downstairs, pretended I hadn't heard anything, and asked to leave early because of a headache. But instead of leaving, I quietly snuck back and hid in the backyard, watching through the living room window. 20 minutes later, when they thought I was long gone, their conversation continued. "So everything's arranged then? 5 tickets for the Caribbean cruise departing next week, 3 days, 2 nights. Sarah clapped her hands excitedly. "Thanks to the money Emma sent, we were able to book the suite rooms." Mom laughed. Everything around me seemed to spin. The money I'd sent for Dad's urgent medical bill was actually being used to buy cruise tickets for the entire family, and I wasn't even invited? "Don't you think there's something wrong with lying to Emma like this?" Michael suddenly asked, his voice showing some hesitation. Dad sighed heavily. "Michael, think about it. Emma makes good money, lives alone, has no responsibilities. We all have families, financial pressures. Sometimes she needs to learn how to share with her siblings. And besides," Mom added, "Emma has never really fit in with family trips anyway. She's always bringing her laptop, always busy with work. This trip we need time to connect with each other without distractions." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Exactly. And Emma doesn't really need vacations anyway. She can travel whenever she wants." These words hit me like daggers straight to the heart. They weren't just deceiving me about the money. They were making me an outsider in my own family. In their eyes, I was just a convenient financial resource, not a family member deserving of respect. I quietly left the backyard and drove home in a state of shock. Every family memory suddenly appeared in a new light. All the times they forgot to invite me to dinner, conversations that stopped abruptly when I appeared, those secret glances I thought were just my imagination. Back home, I sat numbly on my kofa, feeling like my entire worldview about family had just collapsed. They didn't love me. They just needed me. And the most painful part was they didn't even think I deserved to know the truth. But then, from deep inside, a small flame began to burn. Not blind rage, but cold determination. They wanted to play this game? I would play, but by my rules. I opened my laptop and started researching. If they thought I was just an emotionless ATM, then it was time for them to learn that even ATMs can run out of money. The next few days, I lived like an actor performing the most important role of my life. On the surface, I was still the sweet, helpful Emma. But inside, I was preparing for a plan they couldn't possibly imagine. First, I needed to gather evidence. I knew that just overhearing their conversation wasn't enough. I needed concrete proof so that when I confronted them, they couldn't deny anything. On Monday, I called Dad with the excuse of checking on his health. "Are you feeling better, Dad?" "How did the test results turn out?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Oh, everything came back normal, sweetheart. The doctor said there's nothing to worry about." "Can I see the results?" "I want to understand more about your health condition." "That's not necessary, honey. It's just dry numbers anyway. I'm fine now, and that's what matters." This evasive answer was my first real clue. A father who was genuinely sick wouldn't hesitate to share results with his daughter, especially one who had paid for the treatment. Next, I decided to make a surprise visit to Mom and Dad's house on Wednesday. I bought a box of pastries and said I wanted to surprise them. When Mom went to make tea, I quickly scanned the living room and discovered something important. On the coffee table was a travel magazine, open to a page featuring Caribbean tours, and next to it was a piece of paper with a travel company's phone number written on it. "Is Mom planning to go somewhere?" I asked casually. Mom startled and quickly gathered up the magazine and paper. "Oh, nothing really, honey. Just looking for reference. Maybe we'll travel next year." But I had already managed to take a photo with my phone when Mom wasn't paying attention. In the photo, I could clearly see the travel company's name and some handwritten notes from Mom. That evening, I called the travel company, pretending to be Patricia Martinez, my mom, and said I needed to confirm booking information. "Hello, Mrs. Martinez. We're so happy to serve your family. So the 5 tickets for the Caribbean cruise departing Friday next week are still confirmed, right? 2 suite rooms as agreed?" My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. "Yes, I just wanted to confirm the time. Friday next week, correct?" "Exactly. Check-in at 2 p.m., departure at 5 p.m. Your family will have 3 wonderful days and 2 nights. I thanked them and hung up, my hands shaking as I wrote down the information. Now I had concrete evidence. They had actually booked a Caribbean tour with my money, and they were leaving Friday next week. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a plan to make them understand the consequences of their actions. And I wanted them to learn this lesson in a way they'd never forget. My first idea was direct confrontation, but I quickly dismissed it. They would just find ways to justify or blame me, and I'd end up being the difficult and selfish daughter again. My second idea was to expose them on social media, but that was too cruel and could cause long-term damage to the entire family. Then suddenly, a perfect plan appeared in my mind. A plan that was both gentle yet effective, that would teach them a lesson without causing irreparable harm. I would disappear, completely disappear from their lives right when they needed me most. And when they panicked, when they realized they had lost the person they'd always taken for granted, that's when they'd understand my true value. But for this plan to work, I needed to prepare carefully. And most importantly, they couldn't know beforehand that I had discovered the truth. Time to execute. Only 8 days left. The next 8 days, I became a master planner. Every detail was carefully calculated. Every step had a clear purpose. They wanted to play deception games? I would show them what real deception looked like. Step 1 was creating the illusion of dependence. I started calling family more frequently, asking questions and showing proactive concern. I suggested organizing a big family dinner on Sunday, exactly 1 day before they were supposed to depart for their cruise. "Emma, why are you suddenly so active with family activities?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "I just realized I've been missing too much time with family, sis." Work made me forget what's really important. Mom seemed touched. "You've always been our best daughter, Emma." Hearing these words, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. Part of me wanted to believe they really loved me, that their hiding the trip was just a misunderstanding. But then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard, how they talked about me like a convenient financial resource, and my determination flared up again. Step 2 was preparing for the disappearance. I booked a spontaneous trip to Portland, Oregon, a city I'd always wanted to explore but never had the chance. I reserved a room at a boutique hotel downtown and planned to visit art galleries, hiking trails, and food tours. If I had to disappear, at least I'd enjoy the time. More importantly, I set up a perfect communication blackout system. I changed my work email auto-reply to announce I'd be completely offline to attend a wellness retreat without internet. I also set my phone to not accept calls from family contact numbers. Step 3 was all about timing. I needed to disappear exactly when they realized they needed me most. Based on my research, I knew that problems on family trips usually erupted on the second day, when the novelty of vacation had worn off and stress from being together started to show. Sunday's family dinner took place in an atmosphere of fake cheerfulness. Everyone tried to act normal, but I could sense the underlying tension. They kept exchanging glances, and there were strange moments of silence when someone was about to mention the trip, but then went quiet. "Does anyone have special plans this week?" I asked casually while cutting dessert. Michael choked slightly on his water. "Oh, nothing special. Just a regular week. Maybe we'll rest a bit," Sarah added, her voice unnatural. Dad looked down at his plate. "That's right. We all need time to relax." I nodded knowingly. "That sounds great. Everyone deserves rest. I'll be busy with a new project this week, too. Probably won't be in contact much." And their eyes lit up. Clearly, they felt relieved that I'd be busy and wouldn't have time to discover their trip. When we said goodbye, everyone hugged me tighter than usual. Were they feeling guilty? Or was this just their way of feeling better about what they were doing? "Emma, you know family always loves you, right?" Mom said as I was getting ready to leave. "I know, Mom," I replied, and that was the truth. They loved me, but in their way, conditionally and conveniently. Monday morning, I executed the final step of my plan. I sent an email to the entire family. "Dear everyone, I've decided to join a mindfulness retreat for 3 days to completely disconnect from technology and find inner peace. This is what I need after months of stressful work. I'll be completely offline, no phone, no email, no social media. Don't worry if you can't contact me. See you all this weekend. Love, Emma." After sending the email, I turned off my phone, packed my bag, and drove straight to the airport. As the plane took off for Portland, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I was completely free from family expectations and manipulation. But at the same time, part of me felt sad too. I was on a plane alone while my family was preparing for a trip they'd hidden from me. Maybe this was the first time I truly understood the meaning of the word lonely. But sometimes, loneliness is better than being betrayed by the people you love most. Now it was just a matter of waiting to see how they'd react when they realized that sweet, reliable Emma had disappeared. Portland welcomed me with a characteristic drizzly afternoon and fresh air. I checked into the hotel with mixed feelings, excited about this solo adventure, yet worried about what was happening back home. On the first day of my disappearance, I spent time exploring downtown Portland, visiting Powell's Books, the world's largest bookstore, and enjoying coffee at charming little cafes. I tried not to think about family, but it was nearly impossible. Every time I saw other families walking together or having dinner, I felt that underlying sadness. But there were also moments when I felt unprecedented freedom. No one was asking where I was, what I was doing, or when I'd be home. No one expected me to solve financial problems or play the role of reliable big sister. For the first time in years, I only had to worry about myself. Meanwhile, back in California, drama was beginning to unfold exactly as I'd predicted. Through the series of missed calls and voicemails I would discover later, I learned that my family's cruise had become a complete disaster. The first day of the cruise seemed to go smoothly. They checked into their suite rooms, took happy photos, and posted on social media about family bonding time. But then problems started erupting. The first problem was Sarah and Michael beginning to conflict over childcare. Sarah expected Michael to help watch her 2 young children so she could relax, but Michael felt that since he had paid for this trip, though it was actually my money, he deserved to rest completely. "Why don't you ask Emma for help like always?" Michael asked irritably when Sarah's children were crying loudly in the ship's dining room. "Emma's not here, remember?" Sarah replied with a bitter tone. That was the first time that day they mentioned me, and suddenly they realized my absence wasn't just physical, but emotional and practical too. The second problem erupted on the first evening. Dad suddenly had severe stomach pain, possibly from stress or sudden dietary changes on the cruise. Normally, I would be the one worrying, researching symptoms, and ensuring he got proper care. But this time, everyone suddenly realized that none of them had medical knowledge or experience handling health emergencies. "We should call Emma," Mom said in a panic. "She always knows what to do in situations like this." They tried calling me, but of course couldn't get through. My phone was set to go straight to voicemail for all family members. The third problem, and perhaps the most serious, happened on the second day. When the ship docked in Cozumel, Mexico, Michael discovered he'd forgotten his passport at home. In his panic, he tried to contact me to help expedite sending his passport to Mexico, or at least research legal options for him to re-enter the United States. But I was still offline, completely offline. At this point, the entire family began to truly panic. They realized that over the years, I had become their unofficial problem solver, their emergency contact, their go-to person for every crisis. And now, when they needed me most, I had disappeared. "How can we contact Emma?" Sarah asked desperately. "She said she'd be completely offline," Mom replied, her voice beginning to tremble. "What kind of retreat completely bans emergency contact?" Michael said angrily. "This is a real emergency." But the ironic thing was, this wasn't a real emergency. These were just inconveniences they'd relied on me to solve for years. Now, having to handle them themselves, they realized how dependent they'd become. Finally, they had to spend extra money to solve the problems, hire a babysitter on the ship for Sarah's children, pay for medical consultation for Dad, it was just indigestion, and Michael had to fly back to the U.S. early from Mexico to deal with his passport issue, effectively cutting the entire trip short. On the second evening of my time in Portland, while I was enjoying an excellent seafood dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Columbia River, my phone, still on silent mode, had received 37 missed calls and 21 voicemails from various family members. I didn't listen to those messages at the time. Instead, I ordered another glass of wine and watched the sunset over the river, feeling peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. But I knew a storm was gathering back home, and soon I would have to face the consequences of the decision I'd made. However, for the first time in my life, I felt ready to confront the truth, ready to set boundaries, and ready to demand the respect I deserved. Tomorrow would be the last day of my disappearance, and when I reappeared, everything would change forever. The flight from Portland back to San Francisco took place in the silence of my soul. 3 days of disappearance had given me a completely new perspective on family and on myself. I was no longer the sweet, always sacrificing Emma. I had become someone who knew her worth and was ready to fight for it. When the plane landed, I turned on my phone and was immediately bombarded by notifications. 63 missed calls, 42 voicemails, and over 100 text messages. I scrolled through them with surprising calm, observing the evolution of panic in my family through the timeline of messages. Day 1 messages. "Emma, call Mom back when you have time." "Hey, sis, I need to ask you something." Day 2 messages. "Emma, why aren't you answering your phone?" "We have an emergency." "Honey, Dad is sick and we need you right now." Day 3 messages. "Emma, we've called the police. Where are you?" "If you don't call back in 2 hours, we're filing a missing person report." Reading these messages, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because they finally realized my importance, but sadness because they only cared when they needed me to solve problems for them. I decided not to reply immediately. Instead, I drove home, showered, and prepared mentally for the upcoming confrontation. I needed to approach this strategically, not emotionally. At 7 p.m., I called Mom. "Emma!" Mom's voice was practically screaming through the phone. "Where have you been? We've been going crazy!" "I just got back from the retreat, Mom." That retreat didn't allow any communication with the outside world. "What kind of barbaric retreat is that? Do you know how worried we've been?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk. The whole family, tonight." "Of course! I'll call Sarah and Michael right away. They've been panicking about you too." "Have they returned from their cruise yet?" I asked, deliberately casual. There was a long silence. You know about the cruise?" "I know everything, Mom." An hour later, I sat in the family living room, facing all the family members. The atmosphere was so tense you could cut it with a knife. Everyone looked at me with a mixture of relief, guilt, and apprehension. "Before anyone says anything," I began in a calm but firm voice, "I want everyone to know that I heard your conversation last week about using the money I sent for the medical bill to book the Caribbean cruise, about me not being invited because I'm not settled and would be a distraction." Complete silence. Dad looked down at the floor. Mom covered her face with her hands. Sarah and Michael exchanged guilty glances. "Emma, we can explain," Mom began. "No," I cut her off. "It's time for everyone to listen to me. For 28 years, I've been the emotional and financial safety net for this family. Every time there's a crisis, I'm the first person called. Every time money is needed, I'm the reliable ATM. Every time someone needs organizing, planning, or problem solving, Emma will handle it." I looked at each person individually. But when it comes time to celebrate, when it comes time to enjoy the fruits of labor, suddenly I become an outsider. I become the person who's not settled, who doesn't fit in. Michael tried to interrupt. "Sis, we didn't mean—" "What did you mean, Michael?" I turned to him. "What did you mean when you said I'm too trusting to suspect anything? What did you mean when you suggested that sometimes I need to learn to share, but apparently sharing only applies to money, not to family experiences?" Tears began welling up in Sarah's eyes. "Emma, we're sorry. We're really sorry." "Sorry about what specifically, Sarah?" I asked. "Sorry for lying about the medical bill? Sorry for planning a family vacation that excluded me? Or sorry for getting caught?" Dad finally spoke up, his voice broken. "Emma, I'm sorry, sweetheart. We were wrong. We were completely wrong." "Daddy," I said, using the childhood nickname for the first time in years, "what hurt me most wasn't about the money. It was about how, in everyone's eyes, I'm only valuable when I can provide something. I'm not treated like a full member of the family, but like a convenient resource." Mom finally broke down crying. "Sweetheart, I know I hurt you, but I didn't realize. I thought you'd understand because you've always been generous and selfless." "Generous and selfless doesn't mean I don't have feelings or boundaries, Mom." I stood up, feeling the weight of years of resentment lifting off my shoulders. "I need everyone to understand this. From now on, our relationship will change. I will no longer be the default problem solver or emergency fund for this family. If you want me involved in family activities, invite me properly and treat me like an equal member. If you need financial help, ask honestly and respect my choice to say no." "Emma," Michael said quietly, "how can we make this right?" I thought for a moment. "Actually, the cruise isn't the main issue. The main issue is respect and honesty. If you want to rebuild trust, start by treating me like an adult with feelings and boundaries, not like a resource to exploit." Sarah wiped her tears. "We'll pay back the money you sent." "I don't need the money. I need respect." As I prepared to leave, Mom grabbed my hand. "Will you forgive us?" I looked into Mom's eyes, seeing genuine remorse for the first time. "Forgiveness takes time, Mom. But I'm willing to try, if everyone is willing to change. Driving home that night, I felt simultaneously exhausted and liberated. The confrontation wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself and set clear boundaries. The future of our family relationship was still uncertain, but at least now it would be built on honesty and mutual respect, not on exploitation and taken for granted assumptions. And that was a beginning I could live with. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom in San Mateo with bay views that I could afford thanks to my recent promotion, planning my solo trip to Italy when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom, and for the first time in years, I answered without a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" My voice was relaxed, genuinely curious, rather than defensively prepared for whatever crisis might need my immediate attention. "Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to see how your Italy planning is going. Have you decided between the Amalfi Coast and Tuscany yet?" The conversation was light, natural, focused on my interests and plans rather than family emergencies or financial requests. "I'm leaning toward Tuscany," I said, pulling up the travel website I'd been browsing. "The cooking classes in Chianti look amazing, and I found this incredible agriturismo where you can help with the olive harvest." Mom's enthusiastic response surprised me. "That sounds absolutely perfect for you. Take lots of pictures, and maybe you can teach me some of those recipes when you get back." It was such a normal family conversation. A mother excited about her daughter's travels, offering support and expressing interest in shared experiences. 6 months ago, this same conversation would have been tinged with comments about my impractical spending or subtle hints about family members who could better use that travel money. The change was remarkable and genuine. The transformation in our family dynamics hadn't happened overnight. There had been setbacks, awkward moments, and times when we all fell back into old patterns. But gradually, consistently, things had changed in ways that felt sustainable and real. Michael had learned to manage his own financial crises, discovering budgeting skills he never knew he had. Sarah had built a support network of other single mothers and childcare resources that didn't depend entirely on family bailouts. Most significantly, Mom and Dad had started communicating with each other about their own relationship and needs instead of using me as a buffer or mediator. They were attending couples counseling and had started planning activities together that they genuinely enjoyed. Dad had taken up painting, and Mom had joined a hiking group. They were rediscovering themselves as individuals and as a couple, not just as parents who relied on their daughter for emotional and financial support. The first real test of our new dynamic had come 3 months after our confrontation, when Sarah faced a genuine emergency. Her daughter had fallen at school and needed stitches, but Sarah's car wouldn't start, and she had no way to get to the hospital quickly. Instead of immediately calling me in a panic, she first tried calling Michael, then Mom, and only reached out to me when she couldn't reach anyone else. When she did call, her approach was completely different. "Emma, I have a situation, and I could really use your help if you're available. But if you're busy or can't help, I understand, and I'll figure something else out." The respect in her request, the acknowledgement that my time and availability mattered, made all the difference. I was happy to help drive her to the hospital, and the experience felt like genuine family support rather than exploitation. The cruise incident had become part of our family mythology, but not in a way that caused ongoing shame or resentment. Instead, it served as a reference point for how far we'd come and a reminder of patterns we were committed to avoiding. "Are we being cruisy about this?" became Sarah's shorthand for asking whether we were falling back into exclusionary or dishonest behavior. Michael had perhaps changed the most dramatically. His pride had been deeply wounded by the realization of how much he'd taken me for granted, and he'd thrown himself into becoming more self-sufficient and considerate. He'd started a small side business, doing home repairs and handyman work, giving him both additional income and a sense of accomplishment that didn't depend on family financial support. More importantly, he'd begun really seeing me as a person rather than a resource. He asked about my work projects, remembered details about my dating life, and had even invited me to join his recreational soccer league. "You know, I never really knew who you were outside of being our family problem solver," he'd admitted during one of our regular coffee dates, a new tradition we'd started. "You're actually pretty cool when I take the time to pay attention." My professional life had also transformed as a direct result of learning to set boundaries with family. The confidence I'd gained from standing up to people I loved carried over into my work relationships, where I began advocating for myself more effectively. I negotiated for the senior engineer position I'd been qualified for, but too hesitant to pursue, and I started leading workshops on women in tech that had gotten positive attention from industry publications. My dating life had undergone the most dramatic improvement. Once I stopped being available for constant family emergencies and learned to value my own time and energy, I began attracting completely different types of partners. David, the graphic designer I was currently seeing, had actually been impressed by the story of how I'd handled my family's manipulation. "Most people would have either blown up at them immediately or just continued being a doormat forever," he'd said when I told him the whole story over dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant. "The fact that you planned a response that forced them to confront their behavior without permanently damaging the relationships shows real emotional intelligence and strength." Our family gatherings now had an entirely different energy. Instead of me being the default organizer and financier, we rotated responsibilities, and everyone contributed according to their abilities. Michael handled logistics and transportation. Sarah managed childcare coordination. Mom and Dad took turns hosting. I contributed my planning skills and, yes, sometimes financial resources, but as one family member among many, rather than as the sole support system. The conversations at these gatherings were deeper and more authentic too. Without the underlying tension of unspoken resentments and financial exploitation, we could actually talk about our lives, dreams, and challenges in honest ways. Dad shared his struggles with aging and retirement planning. Mom talked about her efforts to build friendships and interests outside of family. Sarah opened up about the challenges and rewards of single motherhood. Most remarkably, they all started showing genuine interest in my life as something valuable in its own right, not just as it related to their needs. Mom asked thoughtful questions about my career goals and offered advice based on her own work experience. Dad wanted to understand the technical aspects of my software projects and had even started reading industry publications to be more informed. Sarah and Michael included me in their friend groups and social activities, treating me like a peer rather than a family obligation. The financial dynamics had changed completely. When Michael and his wife decided to refinance their house, they asked my advice but hired their own financial advisor rather than expecting me to research and coordinate everything. When Sarah's kids needed school supplies, she budgeted for them herself and only mentioned it to me in casual conversation, not as a request for assistance. Most importantly, when Dad had a legitimate medical scare 4 months after our confrontation, chest pains that actually required cardiac testing, they handled it as a family unit rather than defaulting to me for management. Mom coordinated his medical appointments, Michael researched doctors and insurance coverage, and Sarah arranged for childcare so she could be present for the important conversations with physicians. They called to keep me informed and asked if I wanted to be present for the key appointments, but they didn't expect me to take charge or solve everything. When the tests came back clear and Dad was diagnosed with acid reflux that could be managed with diet changes, I felt relief and happiness without the exhausting weight of having been responsible for organizing his entire care. The Italy trip I was planning represented more than just a vacation. It was a symbol of the life I was building for myself, independent of family obligations and expectations. For the first time in my adult life, I was making major decisions based solely on what I wanted, rather than what my family needed or expected from me. "When you get back from Italy, we should plan a real family trip," Mom had suggested during our call. "Something where everyone pays their own way, and we go somewhere that everyone actually wants to visit." The suggestion itself showed how much had changed. The assumption that I would contribute equally, rather than primarily. The focus on shared enjoyment, rather than family obligation. "That sounds wonderful," I'd replied, and meant it. "Maybe we could rent a house at Lake Tahoe for a long weekend." The irony wasn't lost on me. Lake Tahoe, the trip I'd originally planned with friends before canceling to send money for Dad's fictional medical emergency. Now it could become the site of a genuine family bonding experience built on honesty and mutual respect. As I hung up from Mom's call and returned to my Italy planning, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just 6 months. I had gone from being a resentful, exploited family member to being a respected daughter and sister with healthy boundaries and genuine relationships. The people in my life, both family and friends, now saw me as a complete person rather than a convenient resource. The disappearance that had started as a desperate attempt to make my family understand my value had evolved into something much more significant, a reclamation of my own life and identity. I had learned that love without respect isn't really love, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is to force them to face the consequences of their behavior. Most importantly, I had discovered that I was worth fighting for, worth demanding better treatment, worth setting boundaries, worth being seen and valued for who I really was, rather than just what I could provide. My family's love had been conditional and exploitative, but my own self-love was becoming unconditional and empowering. The phone rang again. This time it was David, asking if I wanted to grab dinner and continue planning my Italy itinerary together. As I grabbed my jacket and headed out to meet him, I realized that this was what healthy relationships looked like. People who wanted to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something from me. Sometimes, the best way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it first. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is disappear long enough for people to remember why they need you in their lives. Not as a solution to their problems, but as a person worth cherishing for your own sake. The Italy trip was still 3 weeks away, but I was already planning the stories I would tell when I returned. Stories about adventures I chose for myself, experiences that belonged entirely to me, memories that no one could take away or manipulate. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself, and it felt like coming home.